and frequent showers, but certainly less wet and windy overall, and there will be some brightness in between the showers. Those showers predominantly affecting the north and east of Scotland, northeast England, as well as parts of Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest. In between, some drier and brighter interludes. Feeling on the cool side, however, 13 to 14 Celsius in the south, 11 to 12 further north.
Well, we're talking about the extraordinary story where teachers have gone on strike because the head teacher wants them to smarten up their dress and impose discipline.
Yeah, the teachers should smarten up, and the teachers have said no. We're going to be talking about that. Is that lawless Britain? And also, there's a house that's been destroyed on the Isle of Wight by kids. Again, another example. Where is the discipline?
With chainsaws. And, of course, Mark White in southern Israel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Good morning, it's 9:30 on Thursday, the 2nd of November. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Andrew Pearce, and Bev Turner.
Danger to life. Warnings as Storm Ciarán batters parts of Britain, closing schools, grounding flights and transport, and plunging large areas underwater.
And Britain's escaped the war zone. The Foreign Office has confirmed the first British nationals have left Gaza via the Rafah border crossing, but the war rages on as the United Nations says the bombing of an established refugee camp could be a war crime. Our security editor, Mark White, is in southern Israel.
Well, the sound of explosions from northern Gaza is constant. The fast jets are also always overhead, firing missiles at Hamas positions. We're told by an Israeli commander that they have defeated Hamas's frontline defences.
And remember, we covered this story yesterday. Well, a man has been arrested after boxes of live mice were released into McDonald's restaurants as pro-Palestinian activists called for protests against the food chain giants for donating meals to Israeli soldiers. We'll let you know what's happened. And a school where the teachers have gone on strike because they're being asked to discipline the children about things like, have you forgotten your pencil case for a couple of days in a row? Well, you get a detention. The teachers say it's too harsh. Do you think it is?
And also been told to smarten up their dress code too.
Yeah.
Amazing, isn't it? They used to be smart in my day.
Anyway, we're going to be discussing all of that. gbnews@gbnews.com is the email address. But first of all, here's your very latest news with Rhiannon Jones.
Good morning, it's 9:32. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. A major incident's been declared in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight as Storm Ciarán batters parts of England. Flood warnings are in place along the south coast, with strong winds expected to reach up to 80 miles an hour. Southern Rail has told commuters to work from home where possible. South Eastern strongly advising against travel into London. And hundreds of schools across the south are closed. A red wind warning's in place in the Channel Islands, with winds reaching up to 100 miles an hour. Guernsey resident Jess Morgan told GB News people on the island have been panic buying. Israel says fresh strikes earlier this morning killed 2 Hamas leaders in Jabalia, an area used as a refugee camp. Gaza's media office, which is run by the Hamas terrorist group, said 195 Palestinians were killed in the attack. The United Nations says it has serious concerns Israel's actions could amount to war crimes. Living conditions inside Gaza continue to worsen, with food, water and medical supplies now running dangerously low. Interest rates are expected to be left unchanged today as the Bank of England looks to balance the impact of higher costs on the economy. The base rate was also unchanged in September, held at 5.25% after 14 consecutive hikes. Slow growth and growing concerns of a recession have led experts to suggest today's meeting will see another hold. A decision is expected at midday. And the Prime Minister's played down concerns of a Terminator-style rise of the machines as the second day of the AI Safety Summit gets underway. Rishi Sunak struck an optimistic tone, saying that it's important to assess the risks, but without being too alarmist.
AI has the potential to transform our lives in every aspect, from healthcare to education and our economy. Thanks to the actions we've taken this week, Britain is well placed to be at the forefront of that change. There's debate about this topic. People in the industry themselves don't agree and we can't be certain. But there is a case to believe that it may pose risks on a scale like pandemics and nuclear war. And that's why, as leaders, we have a responsibility to act, to take the steps to protect people. And that's exactly what we're doing.
And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now, though, it's back over to Andrew and Beth.
Well, to our top story today, Jersey Airport has seen the strongest gusts at 93 miles an hour overnight as Storm Ciarán batters the coast of the United Kingdom and the Channel Islands.
That's right. A major incident has been declared in Hampshire and on the Isle of Wight, with warnings that Storm Ciarán could pose a risk to life.
The Met Office has issued an amber warning for wind and multiple yellow warnings throughout the day.
Schools and airports across the Channel Islands will shut down today as they brace for some of the worst weather conditions in 36 years.
But the wild weather certainly isn't isolated to the south. Northern Ireland has already faced heavy flooding, with some rivers bursting their banks as the storm approached.
So joining us now are two of our reporters live from the eye of the storm. Jeff Moody is in Devon. Meanwhile, Dougie Beattie is live for us in Portadown. Let's start with you, Jeff. Where are you and what's the weather like?
Well, I'm here on Instow Beach in North Devon, and we really are at the eye of the storm at the moment. Just have a look out to sea. There's a rowing boat that is just about to go under. We've been watching it for the last hour, and it's not in a good condition. Somebody's going to turn up in a few days and wonder what's happened to their boat. But you can see it really is rough. The winds are really picking up here, and heavy torrential rain. We've seen all sorts of problems over the West Country where the storm really is centering at the moment. We're now hearing that there are 10,000 homes in Cornwall that are now without power. 10,000 power cuts across Cornwall, and that's expected to rise as we go through the day. As you said earlier on, there's an emergency alert in Southampton, in Hampshire, and in parts of the Isle of Wight too, as the storm really begins to kick in. And we're hearing in southern Devon, in Teignmouth, a car was washed out to sea in the middle of the night. The RUC is saying, whatever you do, try not to drive. Try to stay in, certainly avoid coastal paths for very obvious reasons. These waves are really picking up very, very fast, very, very quickly. And also they're saying to avoid rural roads because the damage, the danger of trees falling is really severe. And because this time of the year the trees still have leaves, and those leaves are soaking wet after days and days of rain, that means that the trees are even more vulnerable of falling into the road. Southern Rail has said try not to travel as best you can, and we're hearing that many schools have decided to close. Many schools made that decision last night and said, look, let's make the decision, let's make that call early. Some of them said they're waiting until this morning to decide what to do. But looking at the weather now, most schools, I think, down here in the southwest will be closed today. We're being told that this storm could go on for several days, but I will be here throughout the day for GB News, reporting on the storm from Instow Beach in northern Devon.
OK, thank you. Dougie Beattie is in Portadown. Looks a little calmer where you are, Dougie.
Yes, Bev, definitely no high winds here, but there has been constantly days and days of rain. And what has happened is that sodden ground that has washed it on down into the rivers. And of course, those rivers have now burst their banks. Yesterday, it was the Clonroy River in Newry that flooded the centre of Newry out, causing thousands of pounds worth of damage to homes and businesses. This morning we wake up to find that the River Bann behind me, and I'm standing in the car park where most people would have left their cars to go to the train to travel into Belfast and other areas around Northern Ireland, and they've came back to find their cars underwater. Well, really you have to ask the question, why is this flooding happening? And really it comes down to two or three different issues. Number one, planning, the constant building that is on floodplains, and that's obviously squeezing the water further on down. It has to come out somewhere. And number two is really we have to look at the environmental side of this, especially in around those people that don't want shucks or drains, as they be called in England, in farmers' fields to be cleaned out because of rare newts, etc., that might be in them. And of course then there's a single farm payment. How much of that is given to farmers to maintain their lands? I mean, I was just hearing the other day that this new policy coming out is offering £3 for farmers to cut 100 metres of hedges, and probably even less to clean out those vital drains. And what's happening is that water is backing up onto the land and then coming into the rivers in a deluge, of course, when those drains are so clogged up, and it is causing this flooding to happen, and it is causing thousands of pounds worth of damage to homes and businesses. And of course that will come out in all our insurance policies within the next year. And many here don't even have insurance because they live in areas that have already been flooded once, and they find it very, very hard to get that cover to protect their homes and insurance and livelihoods, and it is causing a problem. And we will be here throughout the day to have a look at what's happening with the clean-up operation.
OK, thank you so much, Doogie Beattie there in Portadown. Now, forgive me, and particularly if your house is flooded, I understand it is very difficult under those circumstances. But why aren't the grids being cleaned out? That's part of the reason for these floods.
Yep.
They're full of leaves and mud and dirt.
But also, why are we not going to work because it's raining? Why are we encouraging people to stay at home? Any excuse not to work in the office or the building or the factory. I mean, we used to struggle to work come what may, didn't we?
We're getting weak.
We are, but it's any excuse.
Let us know if we're being a little bit too cynical about that at GBNews.
Do you think civil servants need an excuse to stay at home on a Thursday or Friday?
No,
local
and also,
government workers.
Kids don't go to school. The weather is bad. Do you know how much education they've missed over the last 3 years? Yeah. Go to school.
Exactly.
Anyway.
Now, on another subject, of course, important development, the Rafah crossing opened yesterday for the first time since the hostilities, since Israel struck back against Hamas, allowing the first British nationals to leave.
That's right. About 44 different nationalities, including Britons, have been trapped inside Gaza since the 7th of October atrocities.
We're going to go live now to Mark White, who is our security editor, who is in southern Israel. Mark.
Yes, we're just overlooking northern Gaza at the moment, and the hope is, as far as the Rafah crossing is concerned into Egypt, that it will be open again today. Another 500 people will be let out. That is a controlled exodus of those foreign nationals, but among the foreign nationals, or alongside them, will be some of the most severely injured Palestinians who will be taken out. About 70 odd were let out yesterday to be treated in Egyptian hospitals, and all around us just more explosions now. I'm going to get out of the way and let you see down towards Gaza itself, the northern part of the Gaza Strip, as those Israeli forces continue to push down. Now you can see actually it's pretty hazy down there. There's a lot of smoke and also just the summer haze is making it difficult to see the landscape crystal clear, but it is from time to time when things clear up we can see there are a lot of devastated, badly damaged or destroyed buildings there on the landscape as those Israeli soldiers continue to push south. And we heard from an Israeli military commander early this morning that they now, according to him, have broken the first line of defence that Hamas has in northern Gaza. It was tough going with these Hamas terrorist positions well dug in, firing anti-tank missiles, setting off improvised explosive devices, hurling grenades and heavy machine gun fire as well at the Israeli troops. No word on the number of Israeli troops who might have been killed or injured, but according to the Israelis, they say that dozens of Hamas terrorists were taken out in those overnight operations, which were supported by this artillery fire, by fast jets that we can hear constantly overhead, firing missiles down onto positions that the IDF soldiers are calling out to those air support units to target. So a real fierce battle that is underway on the ground, and I think it's clear the strategy at the moment seems to be that Israel is pushing down from the north, from that northern Gaza Strip towards Gaza City. At the same time, south of Gaza City, other Israeli troops are pushing inland from Israel out towards the coastal road there, to effectively encircle Gaza City before the big push begins into the city itself. That will be long, that will be bloody on all sides. But the Israeli military commander who spoke this morning said that already, to use his phrase, they are knocking on the gates of Gaza City.
OK, thank you very much, Mark. We've got Esther McVeigh in the studio with us now to discuss all sorts of things, Esther. Always good to see you. Just first of all, reflections on the situation in the Middle East. The Sun newspaper has got an incredible double spread this morning of the babies and the children who have been kidnapped, and it's very powerful. We talk about this big picture issue, but actually when you hone in on the human stories like this, it's heartbreaking.
The youngest one is 9 months old, and the oldest of the kids is 17. 32 of them. None of them, we don't know if any of them have been released. Brings it home, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. When you see an image like that, it's heartbreaking, and you see the ages of the children there, it is heartbreaking.
What have children done to deserve it, in a sense? I mean, they're innocent, aren't they?
But I guess when people take them, they realise the power of what they've got, all those children. They've taken them as hostages. They know that people will want to do something to save and protect those children. They know what they're doing.
Brutal and cynical, isn't it, Hamas? Brutal and cynical. They use their own children as human shields, and now they're stealing the Israeli ones.
Yeah, when Hamas did that attack on Israel on October the 7th, the fallout has gone way beyond the region. It has pierced peace across the globe. It has turned communities against one another. You know, Baghdad to Birmingham, Lebanon to London, Tunis to Tokyo, people are going to the streets. What they have done has caused disruption around the world.
And do you think the police are doing enough here, Esther? When for instance, we saw the police tearing down photographs of missing Israeli children from outside a chemist shop up in Manchester. I think they did something similar in London. Appalling, it seems to me. And they're allowing protesters to chant holy war. They're using that trigger phrase for Jews, the river to the sea.
I mean, I'll support the rank and file of the police, absolutely. But I do think that when those protests happened at the weekend and they saw the numbers, I think they felt intimidated.
Right.
And I don't think they used the powers that they had at their disposal. Yes, they took videos and they've pursued it afterwards, but actually it needs to be stopped then and there. You will know the acts that have come forward, the new Public Order Act 2023, that was working on how do we, you know, curtail protest. Of course, the police crime sentencing and court bill as well limited these protests. I believe the laws are there. I just don't think they're being used.
That's what I think.
But why would they not be being used? Is it as simple as the police being intimidated?
I think it is. They've said they thought if they had have gone in, it might have turned into riots. So they decided then that they weren't going to, and they were going to pursue it afterwards. But I don't think you can do that now. I don't think people can get away with it. It's much more difficult to find somebody on video footage afterwards to put out an arrest for somebody. They need to go in, stop it and break it down, because I think that will feed people's boldness as a way that they can go out on the street and do these things. It needs to be stopped.
We're seeing this really strange sort of trend towards different types of protests. We've seen it really with Just Stop Oil sort of started it, didn't they? And some of these pro-Hamas supporters / pro-Free Palestine supporters. I'm thinking about the mice being released into McDonald's. We understand that someone's been arrested. We covered this story yesterday and we're going to be talking about it a bit later. But that sort of protest is just chilling and odd and really kind of just, it doesn't sit on the streets of this country for me. Hurting animals like that, mice admittedly, and then just releasing them into McDonald's. It's such a strange form of protest. What do we do about that?
It's a filthy form of protest, isn't it? It's
That's
a
the word
health
I'm
and
looking
safety,
for.
but I think it was filthy and dirty. And they need to be stopped. I'd say root out all the vermin, and I'm not just talking about the mice, I'm talking about the people who've done it. But let's look at the powers that the police do have. It seems to me, and this is why I say they do have the powers, if somebody's praying silently outside of a pregnancy centre, they can be arrested. If somebody can shout a 16-year-old, oh, they look like my auntie who's a lesbian, they can be arrested. If 6 anti-monarchists could be arrested at the coronation, why can't these be arrested? That's why I think it is about the number. It is about feeling intimidated. It is being coward. And I think we all take a responsibility, actually, to get behind our police. There's too many people trying to knock and chip away. There's too many lawyers wanting to take cases against them. That's what's stopping them being as bold as they should be.
And they're going to have to be particularly careful, the police, because we know they're planning another huge march on November the 11th, Remembrance Day. which is evocative for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah.
And you just think they're doing this to be deliberately
the planning
provocative.
now, like the protesters are. Get ahead of the curve. Realise in advance what laws you could use. There are laws against, whether it's defacing any of those statues or the cenotaph. They've got those. What are the numbers? What are they saying? There are things like Section 5 of the New Public Order Act. Harassment, alarm or distress in relation to the use of threatening, abusive or insulting words. So they've got that. Combined with Section 18, if it is to stir up racial hatred, they do have those powers. Of course, lawyers are going to argue the opposite way. That's what lawyers do. But they need to stand firm. And as I said, preparation is key because they know this is happening.
Could you possibly give up being a Tory and become the Metropolitan Police Commissioner? Because we want this sort of policing enforced.
Yeah, Mark Rowley also needs to come out.
He
and
does.
If he doesn't think the powers are good enough, he has to say, well, what would we?
Exactly.
Remember, we've been working with them to stop a lot of the stop the oil stuff. So we've stopped that. Locking on's gone, slow marching has gone. We've done all that. So what is it we haven't got? I hear Keir Starmer's come out and said stuff. I thought, well, actually, Labour was voting against most of what we did. Again, it's all right saying what we haven't got. We'll come and explain what it is, because I don't think that's the case. I think all the laws are there.
I can't have you here without asking your opinion on the COVID inquiry, which has been going on. You must have been gripped. It's not the most gripping television to watch, but of course the stuff that's coming out of it is incredibly important, isn't it, Esther? And, you are one of the few MPs who stuck your neck out throughout the last 3 years and tried tentatively at times, sometimes more forcefully, to question the decisions that were being made. What did you make of Dominic Cummings's analysis of the situation? Is there too much emphasis on the personalities involved rather than the process?
Yeah, I totally think it is. I think it's gone into a circus in that regard. I think it's about character assassination, mainly Boris's, who sadly, and I will say this, his instinct was right.
Yes.
He was just too weak to follow it through. He was basically worn down by them. It seems to be for Cummings. I mean, this is the man, who thinks so much of himself and so little of everybody else that he could even say that he was checking out his eyesight as he drove to Barnard Castle.
Yeah.
I mean, what did he think? We're all fools or idiots. So he seems to be going in now with a purpose, doesn't he, to clear his own name. He seems crude, rude and bully boys, the words he's used. But you know what really disappoints me? That actually there's very few people there going to that inquiry who were anti-lockdown and lots of people who were all for lockdowns. What I don't want to see is a rerun of the decisions of 2020, which seems to be the case as they fawn over people like Professor John Edmonds and actually were somewhat dismissive of somebody like Professor Carl Hennigan. I want a proper investigation.
He was slapped down by Lady...
It was awful.
Lady Hallett, the chairman of the inquiry.
What they wanted to do was protect the most vulnerable, but not lock up the country. And they keep talking about there wasn't plans in place. Yes, they were just not to lock down. They decided to go all against them and do a Chinese communist-style lockdown. This investigation needs to look at why didn't they do modelling about what lockdown would do? Why didn't they look at the consequences, what we're saying now, to the poor, to children, the poverty it has unleashed and the destruction to this country?
And Boris should have stuck to his instincts.
Sadly, he should have. And you know what? If he had have,
he
would have been right. I do think he would have still be Prime Minister if he'd have stuck to his guns, but sadly he didn't.
I agree.
All right,
Esther, it's always great. Remind us what time your show is.
10 o'clock Saturday morning, 10 till 12.
With that rather nice co-presenter of yours, that
he's
Philip
all
Davis.
right,
He's not a bad bloke, is he?
My husband, he's all right.
Thanks, Esther. Right, still to come, anti-Semitism in the UK has spiked since the Hamas atrocities. We're going to be talking to a Jewish author after this break. This is Britain's Newsroom.
Hello, good morning. It's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. We're starting the day with Storm Ciarán bringing wet and windy weather across many parts of the UK, but the most disruptive and damaging wind gusts moving along the English Channel, the Bristol Channel, and certainly northern France and the Channel Islands seeing some very destructive wind gusts. Now, the worst of the conditions across southwestern areas will tend to ease into the afternoon, but by this stage the winds are strengthening across southeastern parts with the risk in places of 70 or even 80+ mile-per-hour wind gusts, bringing widespread disruption, especially around southern coastal areas, the risk of damaging gusts and dangerous coastal conditions. Elsewhere, we've got spells of rain. That rain, heavy and persistent across eastern Scotland, northeast England, could cause some disruption in places. Likewise for Wales and the southwest, we're likely to see a large amount of rain through the day, clearing to showers later. Western Scotland, Northern Ireland seeing showers through the day, but certainly spared the worst from Storm Ciarán. And by the start of tomorrow, well, still a blustery day out there, and frequent showers, but certainly less wet and windy overall, and there will be some brightness in between the showers, those showers predominantly affecting the north and east of Scotland, northeast England, as well as parts of Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest. In between, some drier and brighter interludes, feeling on the cool side, however, 13 to 14 Celsius in the south, 11 to 12 further north.
And we're going to be talking a little later about this school where teachers have gone on strike, can you believe, because they object to the head teacher saying he wants them to discipline children more and the teachers to dress smartly.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to tell you the other details that the teachers are rebelling against in just a moment. I think you'd be surprised. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good morning, it's 10 o'clock on Thursday, the 2nd of November. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce.
Danger to life warnings as Storm Ciarán batters parts of Britain, closing schools, grounding flights and transport. Severe flooding caused chaos for a second day in Northern Ireland. Our reporter, Doogie Beattie, is live.
I'm in Portadown, where the River Bann has burst its banks, causing huge problems for not only businesses but for homes.
And Britain's escape war zone. The Foreign Office has confirmed the first British nationals have left Gaza via the Rafah border crossing. But the war rages on as the UN says the bombing of an established refugee camp could be a war crime. Our Home and Security editor Mark White is in southern Israel.
Well, the sound of explosions from northern Gaza is constant. The fast jets are also always overhead, firing missiles at Hamas positions. We're told by an Israeli commander that they have defeated Hamas's frontline defences.
And the Bank of England is widely expected to leave UK interest rates on hold in an announcement at noon. But should it actually be cutting rates to help the economy? Liam Halligan will join us with the latest.
And teachers at an academy school are going on strike today over behaviour policies that they think are too strict. Have schools got too soft? Yes, in my opinion.
Yeah, and these teachers apparently don't like the idea that their teacher wants them to dress smartly.
Yeah,
to set an example to the kids.
To wear professional clothes, it
Yeah,
says.
and also they don't want to discipline the children more than they're already being disciplined. Why not?
Well, it's ridiculous. Let us know your thoughts. GBViews at gbnews.com. Let me know what your school days were like. What kind of discipline did you have to face? First, though, here's the news with Rhiannon Jones.
Thank you, Bev. Good morning. It's coming up to 2 minutes past 10. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. Storm Ciarán continues to batter parts of England. Flood warnings are in place along the south coast, with strong winds expected to reach up to 80 miles per hour. And amber warnings in place in Devon and Cornwall until 11 a.m, with hundreds of schools across the south closed. Well, our South West of England reporter Jeff Moody's at Instow Beach in Devon, a rather wet and windy looking Instow Beach for us. Jeff, just how bad is it where you are? It looks pretty grim.
It is pretty grim, to be honest, but it's grim right across the south coast of Britain at the moment. Lots of weather warnings in place. We're hearing that in Cornwall, 10,000 homes are now without power. A car was washed away into the sea in Teignmouth in South Devon overnight, and there's an emergency situation has been declared in Southampton and in parts of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. We're being advised to try and stay home if you can, to certainly avoid coastal roads as those winds begin to pick up and the waves pick up too, and to keep away from rural roads too, where there's a very serious risk to life, as we're hearing that many trees are likely to fall in the next few hours. I'll be reporting live throughout the day here on GB News, but for now, back to you.
Jeff, thank you very much. Please do stay safe while you're reporting for us. Jeff Moody, our South West of England reporter there at a very, very windy Instow Beach. Now, Israel says fresh strikes earlier this morning killed 2 Hamas leaders in Jabalia, an area used as a refugee camp. Gaza's media office, which is run by the Hamas terrorist group, says 195 Palestinians were killed in the attack. The United Nations says it has serious concerns Israel's actions could amount to war crimes. Living conditions inside Gaza continue to worsen, with food, water and medical supplies running dangerously low. More foreign passport holders are likely to leave Gaza today, with the Rafah border crossing expected to reopen. At least 335 foreign nationals left yesterday. Dozens of severely injured Gazans were also taken for treatment in Egypt following an internationally brokered deal. It's understood around 7,500 foreigners will leave Gaza over the next 2 weeks. Meanwhile, back here in London, a building has been covered in red paint, with someone currently on the roof in an apparent protest related to the conflict in Gaza. Messages about the war have been painted on the building where Weapons Firm Leonardo's is based, with the entrance splattered in red paint. One man's in police custody on suspicion of criminal damage. Officers are currently at the scene. Interest rates are expected to be left unchanged today as the Bank of England looks to balance the impact of higher costs on the economy. The base rate was also unchanged in September, held at 5.25% after 14 consecutive hikes. Slow growth and growing concerns of a recession have led experts to suggest today's meeting will see another hold. A decision's expected at midday. Meanwhile, Sainsbury's has recorded a 27% drop in half-year profits, with the supermarket chain feeling the pinch from rising costs. The company's chief executive says food inflation is coming down and they're working hard to pass the savings on to customers. The Prime Minister has played down concerns of a Terminator-style rise of the machines as the second day of the AI Safety Summit gets underway. Rishi Sunak struck a slightly more optimistic tone today, pointing out the importance of assessing the risks without being too alarmist.
AI has the potential to transform our lives in every aspect, from healthcare to education and our economy. Thanks to the actions we've taken this week, Britain is well placed to be at the forefront of that change. There's debate about this topic. People in the industry themselves don't agree and we can't be certain. But there is a case to believe that it may pose risks on a scale like pandemics and nuclear war. And that's why, as leaders, we have a responsibility to act, to take the steps to protect people. And that's exactly what we're doing.
A 32-year-old man has been arrested after boxes of mice were let loose in 3 McDonald's restaurants in Birmingham. Police are still looking for a second man over the incidents, which appear to be protests related to the conflict in Gaza. A video posted on social media shows mice spray-painted in the colours of the Palestinian flag being chucked into the restaurant. A spokesperson for McDonald's says the company stands against hate speech and proudly opens its doors to everyone. And ever wondered what was on offer for dinner for the richest of the rich aboard the Titanic? Well, a water-stained menu for the first-class restaurant is up for auction. On it, dishes including tornadoes of beef, I don't think I even know what those are, oysters, spring lamb, and duck with port wine sauce. It's a rare glimpse of what it might have been like to dine on board the doomed ocean liner if you did indeed have enough money. It'll be auctioned next Saturday and is expected to reach up to £60,000. You could buy yourself a few dinners for that. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car and digital radio, and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back over to Andrew and Beth.
Well, to our top story today, Jersey Airport has seen the strongest gusts at 93 miles an hour overnight as Storm Ciarán batters the coast of the United Kingdom and the Channel Islands.
A major incident has been declared in Hampshire and on the Isle of Wight, with warnings that Storm Ciarán could pose a risk to life.
The Met Office has issued an amber warning for wind and multiple yellow warnings throughout the day.
Schools and airports across the Channel Islands will close today as they brace for some of the worst weather conditions in 36 years.
But the wild weather certainly isn't isolated to the south. Northern Ireland has already faced heavy flooding, with some rivers bursting their banks as the storm approached.
Well, joining us now is our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie, live in Portadown. Good morning, Doogie. We have to say, we can't ignore the elephant in the room. It looks very calm where you are, Doogie. It doesn't look like you're in the eye of a storm, but tell us what that water is behind you.
Well, I'm actually standing in a car park that was for the train stations here, where commuters would have left their cars and travelled onward on the trains to come back to find them underwater. Behind me is the River Bann, just about 3 fields away there, and it has burst its banks late yesterday evening and came in and flooded Portadown, flooding businesses and, more importantly, homes here. And a short while ago, I caught up with Carla Lockhart, the MP for the area.
There's total devastation here in Portadown. We've seen homes destroyed, we've seen businesses having to cease trading, some of which are only getting back up and running today. Look, this has been a long-running issue. I do firmly believe we need to get better at planning laws. We need to ensure that there is enough floodplains maintained in the area. We need to start to clear out our gullies. We need to try and get our services back up and running to full capacity. If we don't, this will continue.
Well, this is government policy that really isn't linked up, and that's the whole way across the UK. If you think about it, the floods that were in England just a few years ago, they are building in floodplains, and more importantly, they're not putting enough emphasis on the primary protectors of the environment here, the likes of agriculture, who would clean out those drains and shucks and make sure that they're running free, because if they're not, the water that is coming down just saturates the ground and then it eases its way in to the river systems. But when you get the type of rain that we've had over the last few weeks here, well, that just comes in one massive whoosh, I suppose, and then washes downstream. And if you've built on the floodplains, well, then it has to come out somewhere, and unfortunately, that is coming out. It came out in Newry yesterday. The Clonroy River did serious damage in Newry, and this morning we are looking at the same problem with the River Bann that has burst its banks and flooded Portadown.
OK, thank you, Doogie.
You do wonder why they ever built on floodplains and why they still do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not rocket science.
I also wonder why they haven't dredged the rivers and why they haven't emptied the grids. And I will keep banging on about this, because this is a big reason why the water is not running away. We haven't managed this situation.
And it's not like they don't know these storms are coming.
Well, we hear nothing else except the fact that we're all going to be destroyed by climate change. So if this is evidence of that, then let's prepare for it. Let's do something about it. Right, let us know your thoughts this morning. gbviews@gbnews.com. Your emails are coming in.
And now, staying in Northern Ireland, police are investigating an extraordinary story, the presence of a man dressed as a Hamas militant, Hamas terrorist, let's call him what he is, who took part in the Halloween parade in Derry on Tuesday.
That's right, the man's image was posted and shared on social media. As you can see, it is a man, if you're listening on the radio, dressed from head to foot in gear, resembling a Hamas fighter, so military combat with a mask over his face, a headband, Hamas headband on, and a Palestinian flag on the front of his flak jacket, I think they're called.
Staggering. Well, joining us now is GB News presenter and former First Minister of Northern Ireland, Dame Arlene Foster. Morning to you, Arlene.
Good morning, good morning.
This is staggeringly insensitive at best. At worst, it borders on criminal behaviour.
Well, just to give a little bit of context to this, Andrew, Halloween in Londonderry, Derry to some people, is one of the biggest celebrations. I think it's probably the biggest Halloween celebration in Europe, and it's gone to by young people, by families, and there was a huge crowd in the city, actually on the lead up to Halloween and on Tuesday evening. So this chap is apparently walking about on Tuesday in full Hamas terrorist garb. And it appears that no one from the police service thought to stop him and challenge him. And I would know that there would have been police wandering about, mingling with the crowds. And I think it's entirely unacceptable. Now, I do understand the police have said that they're looking into it now, but it'll be nigh on impossible, Andrew, to identify this person because, as you've seen from the screen grab, he's completely covered and it'll be impossible to identify who he is.
Could you possibly arrest him for, though, Arlene?
Well, he's dressed as a Hamas terrorist. As you know, Hamas is a prescribed organisation under the Terrorism Act, so therefore he could be arrested very easily.
Because the implication being that he might actually be a Hamas terrorist. He's holding a plastic gun of some kind. Sorry, go on.
No, all he has to do is show support for Hamas. That's what the legislation says. If you show support for a terrorist organisation, then you can be arrested under that legislation. Therefore, and despite the fact that he probably thought he was hilariously funny, it sends a hugely wrong message to young people who were on the streets of Londonderry enjoying Halloween, having a fun time. This guy's walking about as a Hamas terrorist, normalising terrorism.
Yeah.
And I fundamentally think that that is so wrong for our young people to see. And it should have been stopped on the day. Police say they're now looking into it, but let's face it, it's going to be very difficult to find a prosecution against somebody after the event.
Doesn't this go to the heart, Eileen, of this debate that's going on now? Have the police, A, got enough powers? I think they have. We were talking to Esther McVeigh here earlier in the studio.
Yeah.
She says they have got the powers. They're just not blooming using them.
Well, I think on this occasion they could have used their powers very easily to arrest this gentleman. Presumably he wasn't seen by a police officer. In terms of the mass demonstrations that are going on, that is very difficult because the police would be completely overwhelmed if they moved in to arrest people. And that's the fundamental problem here. And as I understand it, Andrew and Bev, there are more protests planned. Because of the scale of those protests, the police will tell you that all they can do is collect evidence and then try to pursue people afterwards. And you will have seen various photographs that the Metropolitan Police have now put out, people that they want to speak to, people that they want to bring in to have a conversation with about what they were doing at these protests. But really, is that enough? These protests are now happening every Saturday. If I was a Jewish person living in London, I would feel under siege. And therefore, that has to be reflected. And I think government really needs to start directing the police to get a grip of this.
And my worry is as well, they're going to do a major march in London, I think in other major cities too, on November the 11th, Armistice Day, which is, again, it could be very evocative, it could be another trigger point, and one worries about, are they going to attack statues, memorials, cenotaphs? It could be a very, very difficult day.
It could be, and I have to say I'm very concerned about that as well. That is a day when we all come together as a nation to remember the service, the loyalty, the duty, the dedication of our armed forces and what they do for this nation. And on that very day, on that very hour, we're going to have people marching through the streets of London in terms of Free Palestine. And some of those people, not all of them, I acknowledge that, will be in support of Hamas and the actions which they have taken in Israel. And I think that that is something that we as a nation need to be very careful about. What sort of a message is that sending out to people, that we're allowing this to happen all of the time? Meanwhile, in Belfast City Council, we had them voting on expelling the Israeli ambassador from Dublin last night. Such a waste of time in terms of Belfast City Council's time and energy. They should be talking about the city and how to make it a better city, how to deal with the fact that they had 8% rise in their rates. But instead, they were talking about sending a message to the Dublin government to expel the Israeli ambassador from Dublin. Absolutely idiotic.
Yeah, idiotic. And what the hell's it got to do with Belfast City Council? What happens in Dublin? Staggering.
Correct. Absolutely correct. Absolutely staggering. But this is what passes for local government in Northern Ireland, sadly, I have to say.
Which party runs Belfast City Council?
Well, it was a motion brought forward by People Before Profit. I have to say, gladly, it failed last night. But what didn't fail was the fact that they had another motion down in terms of an arms embargo, which did pass through the council last night. This is a council that is charged, as you know, with cleaning the streets, making sure the bins are collected, dealing with making sure people are buried in the appropriate way. And what are we talking about? We're talking about the Middle East conflict. You could not make it up.
Yeah.
Can I just ask you, finally, Ali, why is Halloween, by the way, such a big event in Derry, Londonderry? Why has it become the biggest celebration, if celebration is the right word, in Europe?
Well, I think they have developed it over many, many years. Halloween is celebrated as a fun night. People go out and have a bit of fun, get dressed up and what have you. If you're into that sort of thing, that's all fine. They have made it into a huge event, and I think it's really good for the city. But what has marred the event this year is the fact that this chap, whoever he is, wherever he's from, is walking around in a terrorist garb. And I think that is completely wrong. And for me, sends out a very negative message for what is, I have to say, a very positive event in the city and brings lots of people in for tourist reasons.
Well, let's hope they catch him, Arlene.
Yeah, well, I just don't think it's going to happen because of the fact that he is so covered. The time to deal with him was there and then, and I'm sorry to say that hasn't happened.
Okay. Thanks,
Lovely
Arlene.
to talk to you.
Dame Arlene Foster.
Dame Arlene Foster, GB News' very own.
I don't know. I see that slightly differently. You know what? Would it be the same if it was something? I'm not defending. We don't know the guy's motives, do we, for dressing like that?
To shock.
Was it to shock? That's what Halloween costumes are designed to do, right? To shock.
But this is he's glorifying a terrorist organisation, and we've seen the photographs in the Sun today of 32 child hostages in Gaza, the youngest 9 months. How on earth can that be legitimate in a city, in a country, by the way, which has been scarred by terrorism?
I guess would you feel the same if it was a fancy dress of Putin?
Any terrorist, anybody dressing up as a terrorist, it's not acceptable. Look at that trouble Prince Harry got into, aged 18, when he went to a fancy dress party and he had a swastika on his uniform.
I think it's probably just an ex-soldier, maybe, who's got an old uniform and I thought, how can I make this funny and current? And he's put a jihadi flag around his head. It might just be as stupid as that. Well, anyway, it's an interesting debate.
Yeah,
well, let me know what you think at home. GBViews@gbnews.com.
I would take a very hard-line view. He'd be banged up.
Right, what have we got coming up for the rest of the show? King Charles and Queen Camilla continue their visit to Kenya after acknowledging the country's colonial-era suffering, but they stopped short of an apology. Cameron Walker will bring us all the latest with GB News, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi, on Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick It Up a Gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
And we're just getting some live pictures, if you're listening on the radio, of Charles and Camilla in Kenya. They're sitting there, wondering what they're about to watch. We've got Cameron Walker with us, because, of course, this is their first visit to a Commonwealth nation since King Charles went on the throne. What are they doing there, Cameron?
Yes, well, they're actually in Mombasa, not Nairobi, so apologies for that location strap there. However, the King is Captain General of the Royal Marines, and what you're watching right now is a mock beach landing of Kenyan forces who have been trained by the British Armed Forces. Now, what they're trying to do is create this Kenyan elite fighting force, very similar to the naval commandos here in the United Kingdom, because there are threats to this area of East Africa, particularly when it comes to terror groups such as Al-Shabaab. And what the UK and the United States have been doing is helping to train these Kenyan Marines. Bearing in mind the Kenyan Navy was only set up in 1961 or 62, just a year or two after Kenya gained independence from Great Britain. As I said, the King is the Captain General of the Royal Marines. He embarked on a career in the Royal Navy himself and trained at the Royal Marines base in Devon way back when, must have been 40, 50 odd years ago now, of course. But he'll be very well aware of the kind of training involved in this sort of exercise, and it's pomp and pageantry in action. Just before we got these pictures, the King was on a dais, having a march past and a guard of honour, very similar to what we saw in Nairobi. But, I mean, amazing pictures here of just the sort of training that Britain can give.
If you're listening on the radio, what we're seeing here is effectively a mock-up of a beach invasion. So you've got Kenyan soldiers in army fatigues with guns running up the beach towards the crowd where Charles and Camilla are sat in a gazebo on the back of the beach. It's impressive.
And you know, Cameron, when some of these countries demand money, reparations for the slave trade and for what happened with the Mau Mau in the 50s, Britain and Kenya, they ignore the fact that Britain does an enormous amount of work through its international aid budget, through the Commonwealth, and, for instance, here, training the Kenyan Navy. We give stuff back the whole time.
Oh, absolutely, and you just have to look at the front pages this morning, a photograph of Queen Camilla feeding baby elephants, orphaned elephants, because, of course, conservation, a huge cause close to King Charles's heart. Something which
as was his father.
As was his father, as is his son, Prince William, with his United for Wildlife cause. It's those kind of causes which have really had the spotlight shined on them. Yes, we have talked about, haven't we, at length, about the fact that the King didn't apologise in his speech. Should he, shouldn't he?
Well, the government wouldn't let him.
The government wouldn't let him. It would have had to have been a government decision for him to apologise for that. But on the whole, I think the coverage of this trip, in comparison to Prince William and Princess Catherine's Caribbean trip a couple of years ago, has been mainly positive, because there was questions. This is, of course, the King's first trip to a Commonwealth nation as head of the Commonwealth. And we were, Buckingham Palace and government officials certainly were worried that it would be completely overshadowed by this calls for reparations and apologies. But I think on the whole it hasn't been.
Yeah, OK, super. Thank you, Cameron. Right, a man has been arrested after boxes of live mice were released into McDonald's restaurants in Birmingham. A
video on social media showed the mice that had been dyed in the colours of the Palestinian flag being released into the Star City restaurant on Monday.
A second clip also showed mice in a box in the Perry Bar branch of McDonald's yesterday.
Well, Jack Carson joins us now from outside of McDonald's in Small Heath in Birmingham. Jack, no mice been unleashed on this restaurant yet?
No, this was the third restaurant, Andrew, that was hit by mice on Tuesday. So this became the third restaurant that was hit by mice as the pro-Palestinian protesters walked in with a box of mice and then threw them at staff along the counter and all around the restaurant. Of course, this is one of the restaurants that the West Midlands Police are investigating to try and, of course, find the suspects involved. As you mentioned, a 32-year-old man has been arrested arrested in connection with the attacks on the mice attacks on the McDonald's in Star City and Perry Bar, and they're still looking for a 30-year-old Bilal Hussein in connection with those attacks as well. They've executed, the Westminster Police say, a number of warrants in their determination to arrest him, but are appealing to the public for any more information. The police here say that their position is clear. They say this is appalling and will not be tolerated, and they're going to hunt down and prosecute anyone who commits such acts. Of course, it seems to be Birmingham is the only place where mice-specific attacks are taking place, but we know we have seen copycat attacks as well in Keighley, in Bradford, and a McDonald's there, where stick insects in a box were thrown at staff and also on the floor of that McDonald's, as well as windows smashed. As well as McDonald's, of course, Starbucks and Disney are other big global corporations that are involved in this boycott by many community-driven pro-Palestinian campaigners. And of course, the Starbucks in Keighley and Bradford was the first one to be hit in an act of vandalism as window panes on that cafe were smashed, and the West Yorkshire Police, they said they have arrested a man in his 20s in relation to that offence.
OK, thank you, Jack. Jack Carson there, near McDonald's.
It raises a number of questions. Animal cruelty is one. Where do you get that many mice from? Has somebody cooperated with... Because you can't just go into a pet shop and say, I'll have 300 mice, please.
Maybe that's what led the police to find him, a man with access to lots of mice.
Well, and to have done it 3 days running, or certainly 3 times... And there must be an animal cruelty issue as well.
Look, it's just ridiculous, isn't
it?
And revolting. Right, we're moving on. A new study has shown that lockdowns, front page of The Guardian today, have caused the brain health of over 50s to deteriorate 50% faster than usual. But I'll tell you why The Guardian has got this story all wrong.
And have you ever dined and dashed? Pub landlords say the number of perpetrators, basically they do a runner before they pay the bill, is on the rise.
That and much, much more after your morning's news with Rhiannon.
Good morning, it's 10:32. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. A major incident's been declared in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight as Storm Ciarán batters parts of England. Flood warnings are in place along the south coast, with strong winds expected to reach up to 80 miles per hour. Southern Rail has told commuters to work from home wherever possible. South Eastern strongly advising against travel into London, and hundreds of schools across the south are closed. A red wind warning's in place in the Channel Islands, with winds reaching over 100 miles per hour. A building in London has been covered in red paint, with someone currently still on the roof in an apparent protest related to the conflict in Gaza. Messages about the war have been painted onto the building where Weapons Firm Leonardo's is based, with the entrance splattered in red paint. One man's in police custody on suspicion of criminal damage. Officers are currently at the scene. Interest rates are expected to be left unchanged today as the Bank of England looks to balance the impact of higher costs on the economy. The base rate was also unchanged in September, held at 5.25% after 14 consecutive hikes. Slow growth and growing concerns of a recession have led experts to suggest today's meeting will see another hold. A decision's expected at midday. And the Prime Minister has played down concerns of a Terminator-style rise of the machines as the second day of the AI Safety Summit gets underway. Rishi Sunak struck a slightly more optimistic tone today, saying that it's important to assess the risks without being too alarmist.
AI has the potential to transform our lives in every aspect, from healthcare to education and our economy. Thanks to the actions we've taken this week, Britain is well placed to be at the forefront of that change. There's debate about this topic. People in the industry themselves don't agree, and we can't be certain. But there is a case to believe that it may pose risks on a scale like pandemics and nuclear war, and that's why, as leaders, we have a responsibility to act, to take the steps to protect people, and that's exactly what we're doing.
And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2185 and €1.1466. The price of gold is £1,631.07 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,438 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Good morning. Still to come, anti-Semitism in the UK has spiked since the Hamas atrocities. We're going to be speaking with Jewish author Dov Foreman. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
It is 10:39. You're with Britain's News and GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So, here in the UK, incidents of Islamophobia and anti-Semitism have spiked in the 3 weeks since the Hamas atrocities.
The Community Security Trust recorded at least 805 anti-Semitic incidents. Can we call them what they are? Jew-hating between the 7th and 27th of October, the highest ever in a 3-week period.
That's right. So joining us now for more is the author, Dov Foreman. Good morning, Dov. I think Andrew makes a really good point there. We talk about anti-Semitism, but some people, especially younger people, may not know what that actually means. Is it important that we call a spade and we say this is about anti-Jewish sentiment?
Yes, I think so many people, because of the way that we call it anti-Semitism, don't realise that this is, like every other form of racism, just pure racism against Jewish people, hatred against the Jewish people for being Jewish. And we've seen this throughout history. Anti-Semitism is a virus which has consistently and continuously mutated itself in different forms. They used to hate us because supposedly we were powerful and rich, and then they used to hate us because we were communist, and then they used to hate us because we were on the right. And throughout history, this has mutated, and at the moment we're seeing it rise because of what's going on in Israel. And consistently we've seen when there's any violence or an increase in tensions between Gaza and Israel, we've seen people use that as a pretext on the streets here in the United Kingdom to be anti-Jewish, to be racist against Jewish people, and to increase this anti-Jewish sentiment.
Dov, you've been a very active campaigner against Jew-hating, and you and your great-grandmother, who is a survivor of the Holocaust, have been subjected to especially vicious insults, racist attacks in the last few weeks. Can you share some of them?
Yes, unfortunately, as you say, my great-grandmother and I have received hundreds, if not thousands, of anti-Semitic comments every single day. We have over 2 million followers on social media. And every morning I wake up to messages such as the following: good morning. And at least they start with good morning. And then they say, I hope that what happened on October 7th happens to your great-grandmother and is repeated to her. I hope she gets bombed. She's a dirty Zionist. They say the same about me. Sometimes they say, and some of the things I can't even repeat on air, but sometimes they say that the Holocaust is not a Holocaust, it was a holohoax. They often say that she's a liar, and that she and other Holocaust survivors, especially those in Israel, should be murdered, and that they know where we live and that they're going to come for us. And these are incredibly scary.
Dov, can I ask a question? Are they always from Muslims? Is it always Arab because of the hate and the division that's been caused in the Middle East? Is that predominantly where the hate is coming from?
No, I think especially on social media, what we're seeing are these are people from all faiths, all ethnicities, from all countries, really, not just here in the UK, but I receive hate from people in America, people across Europe, people even in the Middle East, of course, reaching out. And these are young people who just don't understand the situation. They're naive. They've been manipulated through disinformation and through anti-Semitism that they've been subject to on social media. And that's why social media companies do have an important part to play here. Yesterday, I met with TikTok UK to suggest that they have some sort of program in place to combat this misinformation, this miseducation which is going on amongst our youth. And I think it's simple to understand why I'm currently sat at my university in University College London, where there's been terrible anti-Semitism over the past few weeks, both from students and from lecturers. And I think it's simple to understand why those students who are the same age as me feel this anti-Semitism, no matter if they're connected to this conflict or not. And that's because we've seen so much disinformation, so much anti-Semitism and hatred spread on social media.
How long is it going to be before these tech giants are brought to heel? Because no radio station, TV station, newspaper, magazine or publication could survive if they allowed any of this filth and hatred on both sides of the argument, the Islamophobia as well as the anti-Semitism. How long can it go on?
Well, firstly, I think you say that no TV channel could be allowed to do that. I think we've seen from the BBC, and I will say this because I feel very strongly about this, the BBC refused to call Hamas terrorists in the first few days. They were calling them militants, and they were allowed to do that. No one held them to account. I mean, eventually the government started to call on them, former culture secretaries, to call them terrorists. But in the first few days, that led to more anti-Jewish sentiment on the streets. I saw a direct correlation in the anti-Semitism that I was receiving the day after the BBC kept their report up for hours, claiming that the Israelis had hit the hospital in Gaza, which wasn't true at the time. And so actually you say that TV and news wouldn't be allowed to, but clearly they were. But even so, I think the question that you ask about when social media companies, when the tech giants will be held to account, I'm not sure they ever will, because these are people who have so much power in the sense that, and also the law, by the way, doesn't really cover them. I mean, I met with the second gentleman of the United States, the husband of the vice president, yesterday, and he said that he's looking into amending some of the laws to see how in the US they can hold these tech giants to account. But I'm not really sure what the way forward is.
Do you feel feel, Dov, that in the last sort of, let's say, 50 years or so, that anti-Semitism had started to decline, particularly, let's just talk about this country, in Great Britain. And now you've seen a spike in recent times. And can you work out what that is related to?
I think that people have allowed anti-Semitism to maintain its level without kind of calling it out. And people, as we said at the beginning of this interview, people see anti-Semitism differently. And it's, as David Baddiel said in his book, because Jews don't count. People see Jews as powerful and rich people who have friends in governments, which all isn't true. We're just like any other minority. We are less than 1% of the population. And so people have allowed this to go unchecked. And as I say, we've had incredible support, especially at the moment, from the government, from the opposition. But people have allowed this to maintain its level without calling it out, and without calling it out at the same level as they have done with other forms of racism. And I will say this as well, because I think it's important, that we've seen so many on the left at the moment stay silent, all these groups which apparently stand up for social justice. And at the moment, we see them staying silent as anti-Semitism surges on our street, as tens of thousands of people go out every week and make London a no-go zone for Jews like myself. And there are tens of thousands of people, not everyone on these marches are calling for an intifada and violence, but many of them are. And it's scary to be a Jew, especially on a Saturday at the moment in London.
Dov, thank you for that. That's Dov Foreman.
Really brilliantly and articulately put, Dov. Thank you so much for joining us.
2 minutes first. And Karen, we've got Cameron and Emma Wolf here. The Prime Minister today is seeing Elon Musk for a chat after the summit. He should raise with him what goes on Twitter, which is a cesspit of hatred and anti-Semitism and Islamophobia as well.
It completely is, and I mean, I just want to take us from the point that Dov raised there, because, you know, well, in fact, it was Beth's question. You said, have we seen an upsurge in anti-Semitism of late? If you remember 2 years ago when Starmer was first elected as leader, and he started to kick out all the anti-Semites, we regarded Corbyn and that mob as scum. We called them scum because we believed them to be anti-Semitic. And yet now, just 2 short years later, anti-Semitism on our streets has become normalised. And it's become normalised for lots of reasons. One, because the police have stood idly by for the last 3 Saturdays and allowed these pro-Palestinian mobs to chant jihad and Allahu Akbar and all this stuff. This is inciting violence against Jews. And, you know, Dov just said that he has seen an upsurge in violence against Jews, you know, since all this started. And I just think, you know, our cops have contributed to this by doing nothing. You know, you've got Mark Rowley, the guy who said he was going to reform the Met Police, moaning that he doesn't have enough laws to deal with this. Yes, he does. He's just not using them, because there are certain religions in this country and certain peoples who British law does not apply to, are not allowed to upset them in case they get upset. And that can't be the case anymore. We have to tackle this hatred, because it's only going to get worse. Anti-Semitism is now, I've noticed in 3 weeks, our country has changed out of all recognition in just 3 weeks, and it's going to get worse. And, you know, why are we allowing these protests? Because they're not peaceful protests, they're hate protests. Why are we allowing them when countries like France have just outlawed them and said it can't happen? And you know why? Because we've got cops who couldn't handle a dust-up on the street. They don't know what to do, they don't have the manpower, and they don't have the guts, I think, to take these people on. They don't want to, and yet they should.
And we shouldn't blame the rank and file, because they're following orders, aren't they?
I think it's more than that. I think it's more than the police not wanting to get involved, not wanting... I think it's this desperate desire not to offend, that we can't just call a spade a spade. I think Bev made a brilliant point at the beginning with Dov, saying this should be called anti-Jewish sentiment, because I think many, especially young people...
It's Jew-hating.
It's a complicated situation. A lot of people don't understand the difference, for example, between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. But when we call it anti-Jewish sentiment or Jew-hating, which I
well, that's what it is.
It's a terrible phrase, Liz. It's a terrible phrase, and I think that would be
true, Andrew. But you're right, Carol. This central London, just now in central London, I saw an Orthodox Jew with his young boy, both wearing their long black coats, and I thought to myself, without thinking about it, I thought, how brave they are, how brave to be wearing their Jewish garb. And why am I thinking that in 2023? Why are we feeling that someone is brave for walking through the streets?
There was a poll
like
this week that
to be visibly a Jew.
In fact, Julie Burchill wrote a piece this week, and she said that there had been a poll that said the biggest anti anti-Jewish sentiment is among 18 to 34-year-olds, which I found astonishing to believe. But, you know, when you think about it, I mean, Douglas Murray wrote this week, he said, you know, there are times when you wonder how history happened, and then something happens and you realise why it happens. And that's exactly what's happening on our streets.
But they would call themselves anti-Semites. They would call themselves passionate supporters of Palestine.
Yeah.
That's the problem, is that they can feel they're on the side of the
no historical wrong re-Palestine can be justified by hurting Jews today, by abusing them, by threatening them, by terrorising them.
And what were they doing, protesting, 500 of them, outside a Marks and Spencer store? Because the company was founded by a Jewish family. How deeply offensive is that?
And what are they
worrying
doing?
for the staff.
This is only going to get worse. We've got Remembrance Sunday coming up. We've got Commemoration Weekend. This is only going to get worse.
And there's a big march on the 11th. November the 11th, there's a big march.
People who gave their lives for our country, and our monuments are going to be desecrated. The cenotaph is going to be... This is appalling. This is appalling.
Did you hear this week? There's a story about Net-a-Porter. I mean, you probably don't know what it is, but it's the girls will. It's an online luxury clothing company, and it banned a girl, one of their designers called Dodo Bar-Or. She's Jewish, and they banned her for saying Hamas equals ISIS. Now, we know she's completely right. And you know, the FBI boss, Christopher Wray, said this week, he just said, Hamas is the worst threat to the world since ISIS. And yet this girl says it, she's Jewish, and she's dumped from this website on the day that she said it. And you know, the irony of it was that they did this to this Jewish designer, who was brilliant, by the way. She does a clothing line called My Teresa. They did it, ironically, on the day that the young tattoo artist, it was revealed this is the girl who was stripped and raped and paraded through the streets. And on that day, we discovered that they'd also beheaded her at the end of it. So stupid Net-a-Porter and this ridiculous virtue signalling it was doing. And how many other companies are going to do the same thing? You know, on the same day we hear about this girl's terrible end. It's not on, and we should all boycott companies that boycott Jewish people and not who take a stand against Jewish people because they're Jewish.
But I think more seriously, I think that the government and the police need to get control of the situation, because the tension, yes, on social media, but also on the streets, you know, on and off the streets, it's becoming very unpleasant. And Central London is actually a no-go area, and I live in Central London. A no-go area at weekends. I mean, I was in Waterloo the other day, and it was horrible to be caught up in, to be anywhere near it.
I was saying the weekend when there was the big march, 3 young men got on the tube. They'd been at the Palestinian demonstration. They had the Palestinian flags wrapped around their faces, so they were covered, and they were shouting in the carriage, "Who here is Israeli?
You are kidding.
Who here
you
is
are
Jewish?"
kidding.
Absolutely.
Where's the
British Transport Police when you need them? But was I courageous enough to take them on?
No,
I'm afraid I wasn't.
But you can't.
3 of them, probably in their 20s.
Individuals can't sort of stand up to that.
And so what did I do? I got out of the next carriage.
The police are in such a difficult position, though, aren't they, at the moment with this? I do think it is difficult, because what they're effectively trying to do at the moment is not to inflame tensions. They're keeping 2 very entrenched communities happy. They're trying to...
I think they're not keeping either.
No, they're not.
But they're not. But their aim is to pacify rather than inflame tensions. But at what point is that going to change? Because if events in the Middle East start to escalate, which they probably will, they don't show any signs at the moment of looking... Nobody's calling for a ceasefire. Then what happens here?
The cops have taken a side already. The other Saturday, there was a Jewish march planned in a part of North London, and the police told them to cancel it because it would be perceived as anti-Muslim. So Jewish people had to cancel their march, but the other one is allowed to go ahead.
They've taken thousands marching through Central London.
500,000.
But it isn't balanced. I'm afraid we all know which side the police are coming down.
And as Dov Foreman made the point, the Jewish population in this country is minuscule.
I also want us to still live in a country where you can protest.
Of course.
We cannot. We must be really careful.
Who can protest?
Well, exactly.
Terrorist sympathisers can protest?
This is inciting...
But not chanting jihad, which is inciting holy war. That should be...
Those 2 women, you know those 2 women we saw who had the paraglider photographs? Yes, they've been charged, but they won't go to court until 2025. What kind of justice is that for Jewish people? who are watching that and saying, OK, that's how they feel about us. That's the kind of steps they're prepared to take. Get someone caught in a year and a half time, 2 years' time.
Do you feel like, all of us here, do you feel like we had any understanding of the anti-Semitism that was existing in this country before this? I didn't, Emma. I wasn't aware of it at all.
Well, I think when we saw the Equality and Human Rights Commission reporting to us anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, that was jaw-dropping, because it said it was institutionalised in the Labour Party.
But that's what I mean.
In the party of the left.
Well, look at Andy MacDonald the other day, when March, when he made that speech.
MP, yeah.
The Labour MP, East Middlesbrough, when he stood up there, and you should have heard him, the hate in his voice. It was disgusting. And Keir Starmer took a full 24 hours to suspend him.
Yeah.
He was backed up by John McDonnell. These are the people who were around 2 years ago, who were showing their colours.
Who Keir Starmer was working with in the shadow cabinet.
Oh, completely. I mean, completely. But Starmer is in a state now because more than half of his MPs are calling for a ceasefire.
Yeah, and around 4 or 5 million of his votes are
Muslim.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We have loads more stories to get through this morning, ladies. I'm glad you're going to be back in the next hour, because in the next few moments, we're going to be crossing over to our economics editor, Liam Halligan, as the Bank of England is set to announce its latest interest rate decision. That is going to be big news. We are GB
Nice
News,
if they cut them.
Britain's news channel.
Hello again, it's Alex Burkill here with your latest GB News weather forecast. Storm Ciarán has battered the UK over the last few hours or so, and whilst we've seen the worst of it, there is still some further wet and windy weather to come as the low pressure clears its way towards the east. The strongest winds still across southern parts, likely to be in the southeast as we go through the second half of the day. Still the risk of gusts in excess of 70 to 80 miles per hour, but we have likely seen the most impactful weather already today. Heavy rain for many places too. That could cause some further flooding in some areas, though some drier spells towards the far northwest of the UK. It is going to be a cold feeling day, especially in the rain and those strong winds, and temperatures a little bit below average for the time of year. More wet and blustery weather to come as we go through this evening and overnight, particularly down the eastern side of the UK, eastern Scotland, northeast England, likely to see some further heavy rain and possibly more flooding as we go through the early hours of Friday too. Elsewhere, some drier, clearer weather towards the south and west, and so it may be a touch chillier than last night because there will be some clear skies around. Into Friday, and we still have a low pressure out in the North Sea. That is what was Ciarán, and it's bringing further blustery, heavy, showery weather across particularly eastern parts of Scotland, maybe northeast England too, but also showers coming down across Northern Ireland into Wales and western England as well, staying driest towards the southeast, and here temperatures a little bit higher than today with highs of around 14 Celsius.
Still to come, we're going to talk about that academy school where teachers are going on strike over behaviour policies they think are too strict.
I don't think
kids.
they're too strict. I've read them. I think every school should be doing them because schools, frankly, have gone a little bit too soft.
And they're going on strike for 5 days.
GB News, don't go anywhere.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Can you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teacher.
It's your new teacher. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Morning, it's 11 o'clock on, what is the date? Thursday, the 2nd of November. This is GB Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So the Bank of England is widely expected to leave, let's hope, UK interest rates on hold in an announcement at noon. But should it actually be cutting the rates to help our weak economy? Liam Halligan will be here in the studio to explain all.
And Britain's escaped the war zone. The Foreign Office has confirmed the first British nationals have left Gaza via the Rafah border crossing. The war continues to rage on. The United Nations says the bombing of an established refugee camp could be a war crime. Our Home and Security editor, Mark White, he's in southern Israel.
Well, the sound of explosions from northern Gaza is constant. The fast jets are also always overhead, firing missiles at Hamas positions. We're told by an Israeli commander that they have defeated Hamas's frontline defences.
Teachers at an academy school are going on strike today over behaviour policies that they think are too strict. What is happening in our schools? That story just makes me despair.
Well, we're going to have a really good debate on that.
Yeah, we are. If you've got grandchildren or children at schools, let us know. Do you think they have enough punishment? Your emails are coming in. We will get to them, I promise. It's been a very, very busy show. First, though, here's your news with Rhiannon Jones.
Bev, thank you. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. Storm Ciarán continues to batter parts of England. Flood warnings are in place along the south coast, with strong winds expected to reach up to 80 miles per hour. An amber warning is in place in Devon and Cornwall, with hundreds of schools across the south closed. Well, our southwest of England reporter Jeff Moody's at Instow Beach for us in Devon. Jeff, it looks like it's calmed down somewhat since we last spoke. Has the worst passed?
I think it has, actually, yes. The eye of the storm seems to have passed North Devon, but it is heading eastwards. Forecasters are saying that it's hit a little bit further south than they thought, so the main danger is along the south coast. We're hearing of incidents, as you know, in Hampshire and in the Isle of Wight. There's an emergency incident been declared there. But yes, it is passing on. 10,000 homes are now without power in Cornwall. Huge number of homes have had power cuts this morning, and we've heard of cars that one car that has gone into the water in Teignmouth in South Devon. Many roads closed. Around 300 schools along the south coast have closed for the day too. So the storm is still causing chaos. The RAC is advising motorists to steer clear of coastal roads and to steer clear of rural roads too, because the real danger here is that trees will fall onto the roads.
Jeff, yet again, thank you very much for bearing the brunt of that weather out there for us. Stay safe. Israel says fresh strikes earlier this morning killed 2 Hamas leaders in Jabalia, an area used as a refugee camp. Gaza's media office, which is run by the Hamas terrorist group, says 195 Palestinians were killed in the attack. The United Nations says it has serious concerns Israel's actions could amount to war crimes. Living conditions inside Gaza continue to worsen, with food, water and medical supplies running dangerously low. More foreign passport holders are likely to leave Gaza today, with the Rafah border crossing expected to reopen. At least 335 foreign nationals left yesterday. Dozens of severely injured Gazans were also taken for treatment in Egypt following an internationally brokered deal. It's understood around 7,500 foreigners will be able to leave Gaza over the next 2 weeks. Meanwhile, back here, the Foreign Office in central London has been splattered in red paint in an apparent protest. Another building in the Piccadilly area was also targeted, with someone making it onto the roof in a protest related to the ongoing conflict. Messages about the war have been painted onto the building where a weapons firm is based. One man is in police custody on suspicion of criminal damage. Officers are still at the scene. The Prime Minister has played down concerns of a Terminator-style rise of the machines at the second day of the AI Safety Summit. Rishi Sunak struck a slightly more optimistic tone today at Bletchley Park, pointing out the importance of assessing the risks without being too alarmist.
AI has the potential to transform our lives in every aspect, from healthcare to education and our economy. Thanks to the actions we've taken this week, Britain is well placed to be at the forefront of that change. There's debate about this topic. People in the industry themselves don't agree, and we can't be certain. But there is a case to believe that it may pose risks on a scale like pandemics and nuclear war, and that's why, as leaders, we have a responsibility to act, to take the steps to protect people, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Well, Rishi Sunak also sat down with United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres at the summit. The pair met to discuss the situation in Gaza. The Prime Minister says the UK is working closely with the UN to bring in aid. Interest rates are expected to be left unchanged today as the Bank of England looks to balance the impact of higher costs on the economy. The base rate was also unchanged back in September, held at 5.25%. That's after 14 consecutive hikes. Slow growth and growing concerns of a recession have led experts to suggest today's meeting will see another hold. The decision's expected at midday. Sainsbury's has recorded a 27% drop in half-year profits, with the supermarket chain feeling the pinch from rising costs. The company's chief executive says food inflation is coming down and they're working hard to pass the savings on to customers. A 32-year-old man has been arrested after boxes of mice were let loose in 3 Birmingham McDonald's restaurants. Police want to speak to a second man, Bilal Hussein, over the incidents, which appear to be protest-related to the conflict in Gaza. A video posted on social media shows mice spray-painted in the colours of the Palestinian flag being chucked into the restaurant. A spokesperson for McDonald's says the company stands against hate speech and proudly opens its doors to everyone. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car and digital radio, and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News now. It's back over to Andrew and Bev.
Well, the Bank of England will make its decision on base rate of interest at noon today.
They are expected to keep the rate on hold at 5.25%. It will no doubt be a glimmer of hope for households battling with increasing mortgage repayments.
Joining us in the studio is our very own economic and business editor, Liam Halligan, with On the Money.
So, Liam, what do you think? Are they going to keep interest rates where they are?
I think they will. The Federal Reserve, the US central bank, the most important central bank in the world, kept interest rates on hold last night. That gives the Bank of England a kind of cue, if you like. We've had 14 interest rate rises since December 2001. Actually, let's have a look at a little graph here. You can see the history of interest rates. I do like a graph. Here we see from 2017, interest rates were very, very low, and then we had the COVID pandemic when they went all the way down to 0.25%, and since then we've had that staircase on the right of 14 interest rate rises, and we're now at 5.25%. Last month we kept interest rates at 5.25%, or at least the Bank of England did, and I think this month they'll do the same. So there'll be a sense now that interest rates have peaked. It may be that there's an energy price spike this winter and the Bank of England puts interest rates up some more, but I do think this will help the housing market if you want to see house prices stabilise or go up a bit. I know a lot of youngsters want to see house prices crash, so they got more chance to buy a house. But bad news for savers, if you like. Savers are getting a bit more money, a bit more return on their savings now, but I don't think we're going to see an interest rate rise today. I think we're going to stay where we are.
Quite useful. And when you think about the election, Liam, interest rates going up, Sabre's getting more money, that's going to be the grey vote, because they've often got a lot of money in the building society or bank, which could help the Tories.
That may help the Tories, Andrew, but the reality is, while banks and mortgage companies instantly put your variable rate mortgage up, when the Bank of England puts the interest rate up,
the other way, aren't they?
They often don't pass on the rate rising.
How are they allowed to get away with that?
Because the regulators are all out to lunch or working from home or asleep at the wheel. You know, these massive ranks of civil servants we pay for, they don't get on the bank's case. It's as simple as that. And the banks know they can get away with it because, you know, there's just a lack of kind of administrative grip going on here. But why are interest rates on hold? The main reason is because inflation has been coming down. Let's have a look at some inflation numbers here. We'll see that back last year, inflation peaked in this country at 11.1%. That's pretty high by international standards. That was in October 2022. So that means in October 2022, the basket of goods was 11.1% more expensive than in October 2021. GBNews viewers can see that the inflation rate has come down. It hasn't come down in a straight line. It hovered around 10% for 4 or 5 months. Then it hovered around 8%, 9% for a couple of months. And in the last 3 months, it's been 6.8, 6.7, and then 6.7% in in September. The October number comes out in a couple of weeks' time. That's still high. That's still more than 3 times the 2% target. But the October number, when it comes out later this month, will be lower because the Ofgem energy price cap has come down a fair bit because food prices or food price inflation is starting to ease. Prices are still going up, high, but they're going up by less. And I think the real reason, if I was on the Monetary Policy Committee, chance would be a fine thing, that ship's probably sailed.
They're idiots, Liam.
Yeah, whatever. They can't afford me. If you look at the GDP numbers, the latest GDP numbers, the economy is sort of flatlining here in the UK. But if you look at what I often report on GB News, the preliminary kind of survey numbers of the economy, they're called the PMI numbers, the Purchasing Managing Index numbers. The UK economy is contracting, Andrew and Bev, and it has been for the last 2 or 3 months. It hasn't been picked up in the official figures yet, but it is in the PMI figures, and they are surveys of business leaders about what's actually going on. They are the really up-to-date numbers. So you've got the PMI numbers showing that the economy is now contracting.
But why is it contracting?
It's contracting because we've had 14 interest rate rises. Right, yeah. It's contracting because we've got a lot of geopolitical angst. It's contracting because consumers are scared that fuel prices are going to spike again this winter. I mean, the public's always ahead of the political and media class, always. People know in their bones we're not through the bad stuff. They know that, even if interest rates stay where they are today. So they're not spending the way they were. They're not borrowing the way they were. Demand for bank credit is contracting. The supply of bank credit is contracting. Mortgages are very, very low. We've seen a lot of insolvencies yesterday. Quite astonishing numbers. It sounds boring, doesn't it? But behind almost every insolvency, Andrew and Bev, there's a family, there's a business, there are hopes and dreams, there are difficult relationships, there's people, thwarted because they can't get their business off the ground and their business folds. Insolvencies in the first 9 months of this year were 13% up on insolvencies in the same 9-month period last year, the highest number of insolvencies in a 9-month period since the Lehman collapse in 2008-9. Wow. So the economy is constricting now. These 14 interest rate rises are now starting to really do their worst, bearing down on inflation, crushing enterprise in order to get inflation out of the system. Another interest rate rise now would be, in my view, deeply counterproductive. The economy is already on the verge of recession. The US has shown that you can get your arms around inflation. Inflation in the US is now well below 4%.
Yeah.
And the US economy is growing. It helps to be the biggest economy in the world, but you can achieve that soft landing. The Bank of England needs to hold its nerve now and not raise interest rates.
The trouble is, Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, didn't he actually go on record as saying, actually, a recession may be the price worth paying to tame inflation?
I think when Chancellor Norman Lamont famously said the same thing in retrospect, didn't he, in the early 90s. I think when chancellors say that, what they're trying to do is they're trying to signal to financial markets that they are not going to stop the Bank of England doing what they need to do. If the Bank of England feels that they need to raise interest rates again to really push this inflation out of the system. Look, the Bank of England was so slow to start raising interest rates. They'll say, oh, we were the first. Yeah, but everyone was slow. And the danger is now that they overcompensate by raising too far and keeping interest rates high for too long in order to sort of make up for the fact that they were so slow to get on top of inflation in the first place.
If you had to get out your crystal ball, Liam, and say when would be a good time for Rishi Sunak to call a general election in relation to what will happen in the economy, when would that be?
Well, this is a really difficult thing. I do think inflation is going to come down quite sharply now for the rest of the year. And if that happens, I do think growth will get going. The UK economy is pretty resilient. I think we need to solve energy prices, though. That's the thing. If you have a kind of geopolitical whiz-bang this summer, if through some combination of the OPEC energy oil exporters cartel, the UK hasn't got much gas storage, if the Russians really decide to put the squeeze on global gas supplies, they're still selling a lot of gas around the world. If you have, heaven forbid, a conflagration, a real escalation of violence in the Middle East, which leads to a big energy price spike, then I would say the UK is pretty exposed because we are an oil importer, because we don't have much gas storage.
Which would mean, therefore, Rishi Sunak pushing a general election
further and further away
into 2024.
If you don't have,
so rather than May, which is what it's speculated to be, first week of May, you might be looking at October next year.
That's right. So what happens this winter will determine, in my view, whether or not it's a May or an October election. If we get smoothly through this winter, in terms of energy prices, they might go for May. If we don't get smoothly through this winter, they'll go for more time for the economy to recover, and it'll probably be October.
And there's another factor here, of course, Liam. If they go in October, and then we have a mild summer, and hundreds of boats cross the channel.
That's it.
He's failed on that key to stop the boats.
It's four-dimensional chess, isn't it? But in the end, when the election is, these are political parlour games. That it's important, obviously, and financial markets are watching and so on. But in the end, what do people really care about? What people care about is cost of living, interest rates. I would say the cost of living crisis now is starting to ease. I do think inflation is going to come down quite sharply. I do think interest rates are going to be held today. But there is that big proviso. If geopolitics gets a lot worse, then all those predictions, I'm afraid, are out the window.
OK, great. Thanks, Liam. So you'll be bringing us that interest rate at about midday.
At noon.
Midday. Right, still to come. Fierce fighting in Gaza is continuing with loud explosions heard overnight. Meanwhile, the United Nations says that it has serious concerns that Israel's actions could amount to war crimes. We're going to have all of that and a lot more in just a moment. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GBNews.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Well, Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Welcome back. It's 11:20. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. You have been getting in touch, and we are finally getting to your emails. I'm sorry, it's been such a packed show this morning. GBviews at gbnews.com is the email address. This is about this school that we're going to be talking about in just a moment. There's a school in Cambridge which has restricted... The teachers are on strike because the restrictions they want to impose, the head wants to impose in terms of discipline. And Stephen says the behaviour in many schools up and down the country is appalling. Kids refusing to do their lessons, standing on desks, back-chatting teachers, threatening teachers and making false accusations against teachers. No wonder the teachers are leaving in droves, that's right. And also Storm Ciarán. We've been talking about the fact that Storm Ciarán, which frankly a lot of you are agreeing with me, Duncan says, I'm not an expert, but our council haven't cleaned any drains for some time. Yeah. All the drains are blocked, as far as I can see. This will not help.
Well, probably working from home doesn't help.
Paul agrees with you. There does appear to be a generational shift in the fortitude of my 50s and 60s generation to today's workforce, many of whom appear to have a view that they have a right to work from home. Yep. Indeed, they feel victimised if asked to turn up. Weather like today's is a godsend for such people.
Any old flipping excuse.
Yeah.
Now, Israel's attack on Hamas has continued as loud explosions were heard overnight, with 2 terrorist leaders killed.
Meanwhile, the United Nations says it has serious concerns that Israel's actions could amount to war crimes as living conditions inside Gaza continue to worsen.
Well, joining us to take the latest developments is our very own Home and Security Editor, Mark White, who's in southern Israel. Mark.
Well, the fighting is continuing. Really, we've had no let-up in the sound of explosions. The combat jets overhead that have been striking Hamas targets, they are being directed effectively by the troops on the ground who are pushing in to northern Gaza, heading south very slowly and meticulously and coming under very significant fire. I'm just going to step to the side again and we'll give you a shot down into northern Gaza. It is, I'm afraid, pretty hazy and smoky down there because, in large part, due to the explosions and the fires from the Israeli missile and artillery strikes into that area, as well as this kind of northern advance that we're seeing. We know that there are IDF forces south of Gaza City who are pushing in from the Israeli border right towards the coastal road on the Mediterranean. There, it's clear that after this has happened, then Gaza City itself is going to be effectively cut off, encircled, and then at some point the go-ahead will be given to push forward into Gaza City, and that is, of course, going to be long and bloody. What we've been told by the Israeli military, even just overnight, those operations as the IDF forces are pushing forward, they are being met by fierce resistance from Hamas terrorists who are well dug in, have been firing anti-tank missiles, setting off explosive devices and lobbing grenades at those advancing troops. And that's why we hear the roar of the combat jets and also military helicopters and drones as well, because the ground troops are calling in that close air support to take out these targets to help them in their advance. But it is very slow, very methodical, very painful and bloody, this advance. We don't know what the casualty toll on the Israeli side is today, but yesterday it had risen to 17. Of course, the toll on the other side is significantly higher, and amongst the Hamas fighters are inevitably the civilians that have been caught up in these horrific events unfolding just a kilometre from our position.
That's Mark White, who's talking to us from southern Israel, and he'll be with GB News throughout the day, keeping us up to date on the developments. We've now got in the studio, delighted to say, Charlie Rowley, who worked with Michael Gove, the Cabinet Minister. Charlie, the Tory party seems to be pretty in a united position on Gaza, to be no ceasefire. I know some parliamentary private secretary nobody's ever heard of lost his job the other day. The real problems are in Keir Starmer's ranks.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think, look, you know, you can call for a ceasefire, you can call for a pause in the action, but I think people are missing the point. This is a prescribed terrorist organisation. Hamas aren't calling for a ceasefire. And, you know, what would that achieve? I'm afraid to say to people that it would only result in Hamas regrouping, reconfiguring, and then with the ability to go and commit the kind of attacks that it committed on the 7th of October.
But it is a horrible moral quandary, isn't it, Charlie, of what a proportionate response would be, given that even the Israelis who are the children, this Mirror have got pictures of them, who've been
32
kidnapped.
of them.
They are in Gaza. So what is the proportionate response when completely innocent young people are being bombed?
Well, there has to be a whole international community effort to ensure that there is further release of hostages. Some have been released, and that's absolutely welcome. So there needs to be more pressure from all sides, and particularly those within that region, so Egypt, Saudi Arabia, putting pressure on Gaza and Hamas to release those hostages. Now, if that can take place, and you can then suggest to Israel, whilst that is ongoing, you might need to sort of take your
estimate. They made the point earlier, though, in the programme, Charlie, GB News presenter, Tory MP, she said they knew exactly what they were doing when they stole the kids, because it's so emotive, it's so powerful, and they're a hugely valuable bargaining chip.
Absolutely, and it goes to the extent of what Hamas are about. You know, they are a terrorist organisation. They're committing the most awful acts. They are not Palestine. We have to make that absolutely clear. It is not a government. It is a terrorist group, as far as Israel is concerned, because of the acts that it's committed, because of the way it integrates itself in the local communities within Gaza, makes it so hard for the Israelis to get to them, to sort of, get them wiped out. So it's a conflict that is going to, I'm afraid, see no sign of end. But, you know, as an international community and an international effort, everybody has to play their part in trying to bring this sorry saga to a close.
We can't have you here, Charlie, without talking about the sham that is the COVID inquiry, some might say. You were there. You were Special Advisor to Michael Gove.
He was part of the Quad of 4 ministers making the big decisions.
I am particularly frustrated, and several commentators have been on this show to say the same thing, of all this preoccupation with character, who said what to who, which is distracting from the real issues. How do you see it? Because you were there, and you probably, this is no surprise, I didn't need a COVID inquiry to tell me that Dominic Cummings was an arrogant man or that Matt Hancock couldn't be trusted. Well, I don't care about those things.
Well, I think that's right, actually. I think the extent of the messages that we've seen in the kind of tone and the language is abhorrent. It's not fit for anybody that is in number 10 or at the heart of government, and I think everybody accepts that. And I think, again, I do agree with you that this shouldn't just be about personalities and, you know, who said to what to who and who liked who and who didn't and all the rest of it. But what has come out of the inquiry, and why I do think it's a good idea to have the inquiry and why it should go on and to continue to expose some of the failures, is both Helen McNamara, and Dominic Cummings have both corroborated each other's view that when pressing the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, were there plans in place? Are we OK? Are we going to be ready and able to deal with the pandemic? They were consistently reassured that that was the case, but it turns out, obviously, that was
no plan at all, she said.
But that tells me nothing about how useless Matt Hancock is in that position. He won't be in that position in the future. So why is that relevant?
Well, then, you know, there will be lessons learned from the inquiry to make sure that actually, does there have to be more process in place? Does there have to be more scrutiny for ministers? What do you have to, you know, if you're... or does it just come down to individual characters at the time? And, of course, that will be something that maybe... health secretaries in the future, governments in the future will have to make sure that they are absolutely whiter than white than what we saw during this.
Did you know when you were working with Michael Gove as part of the Quad that there was absolutely no plan for when this pandemic reached these shores?
In the meetings that I was in and what Michael would have been in, he would have had the same information that both Helen McNamara and Dominic Cummings and the Prime Minister received, which was that the Department for Health had a plan.
There was a plan.
And it might have been a... and look, Matt Hancock, you know, has got to come to the inquiry himself and answer some of these questions. And I think what people will also want to understand is after the first lockdown...
Yes.
Can be a whole question mark about whether you want lockdown or thought that was right 100%. Or wrong. What happens after that? So masks in schools, the timing of opening up the economy in September, the second and third lockdown, the tiering system...
The cost-benefit analysis of lockdowns. Full stop. Where's that? Why aren't they asking them that they didn't do it?
They never did one.
Well, there was... And this is what frustrates me, personally, is because there was conversations that took place in Michael's office between him and his team where we had different views about COVID, but we were always respectful of each other. We would never message each other or message about each other in the way in which I've seen
I'm not bothered about that.
in number 10.
I don't care if you were throwing four-letter words at each other day and night. That does not matter.
But I think what matters is making sure that you can have alternative voices in the room and you can be listened to. And
it's not an echo chamber.
And it's not an echo chamber. And I fear, and I think what has been corroborated so far, is that if you were not on or signed up to one particular course of action, which is more regulation, more lockdown for as long a period of time to get on top of the growth...
To control the people.
And no realisation about the numbers that you can't see. So there was a fixation about hospitalisations, about the R rate and the potential spread of the virus, and that is very, very important. But was there enough due consideration given to people that might have suffered with long-term mental health illness?
Families.
People that were disproportionately affected by the COVID pandemic because of the jobs that they were doing, and that tended to be black and minority ethnic groups of people, people that were in domestic violence relationships. There was no real thought process given to everybody else.
Part of that, according to Helen McNamara, is because the women who were trying to have some say, women are often much more sensible in my view, were shouted down. So that's why nobody cared about domestic violence. Nobody thought about the impact on kids on schools and mums who live in a tower block with 3 kids locked down.
And I think there was this, this was a mentality of perhaps a group of men, Oxbridge-educated, that were trying to outperform each other in terms of how clever they could be in terms of the next set of regulations. But, I mean, Priti Patel was the Home Secretary during that period of time, who was actually very supportive or trying to make sure that there was support for victims of domestic abuse. So I would slightly disagree with Helen there, but broadly of the evidence that she gave and broadly of the evidence that Dominic Cummings gave, they were quite in sync and it was quite revealing, and that's why I think the inquiry should continue to get to the bottom of all of the answers that we want answered.
Does it really have to go on for 4 years?
Well, it shouldn't do.
It's an outrage.
And at a great cost and time, I know. But the fact is that I think there are not just the victims of the bereaved people that died. Obviously, they will want answers as to things about the NHS,
How about people
PPE.
who are dying now of excess deaths as a result of lockdowns?
And that is exactly why the inquiry needs to answer for all of us, because everybody needs a sacrifice.
And they're not going to be discussing that. Yeah, anyway, you know my feelings.
Charlie, we're going to see you on Monday because there's going to be a rather interesting political book published at the weekend which will have something to say about your former boss, Michael Gove, so we want to talk to you about that on Monday.
I look forward to it.
Yeah, I look forward to it too.
Thanks, Charlie. Right, still to come, as we've just been discussing, the blame game. The COVID inquiry has exposed more than a few rotten apples, but instead of playing the blame game, should it be examining whether lockdown was ever needed in the first place?
We're going to go to the news now with Rhiannon.
Good morning, it's 11:33. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. A major incident's been declared in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight as Storm Ciarán batters parts of England. Flood warnings are in place along the south coast, with strong winds expected to reach up to 80 miles per hour. Southern Rail has told commuters to work from home where possible. Southeastern is strongly advising against travel into London, and hundreds of schools across the south are closed. A red wind warning is in place in the Channel Islands, with winds reaching over 100 miles per hour. A building in London has been covered in red paint, with a man still on the roof in an apparent protest related to the conflict in Gaza. Messages about the war have been painted onto the building where weapons firm Leonardo's is based, with the entrance splattered in red. One man's in police custody on suspicion of criminal damage. Officers are still at the scene. And the Prime Minister has played down concerns of a Terminator-style rise of the machines on the second day of the AI Safety Summit. Rishi Sunak struck a more optimistic tone at Bletchley Park today, saying it's important to assess the risks without being too alarmist.
AI has the potential to transform our lives in every aspect, from healthcare to education and our economy. Thanks to the actions we've taken this week, Britain is well placed to be at the forefront of that change. There's debate about this topic. People in the industry themselves don't agree, and we can't be certain. But there is a case to believe that it may pose risks on a scale like pandemics and nuclear war, and that's why, as leaders, we have a responsibility to act, to take the steps to protect people, and that's exactly what we're doing.
And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2193 and €1.1464. The price of gold is £1,631.50 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 sits 7,435 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
.39 with Britain's Newsroom on GB News. I called it GB Newsroom the other earlier. I think I'm obviously losing my mind. Some people think it's gone long ago. Yeah. Now, finally, we're getting to our big debate about this academy school in Cambridgeshire where teachers have gone on strike over what they said draconian behaviour policies, such as
giving pupils detention if they repeatedly forget to take a pen. Well, the school in question, St Ivo Academy in St Ives, released the following statement. They say, obviously, it's disappointing that the strike action is going ahead, particularly so given that we do not recognise many of the claims being made about our school. St Ivo has become a calm, purposeful and inclusive school which values academic endeavour and scholarship.
Aha.
So, do the striking teachers have a point, or do they need to toughen up? Well, we're joined now by maths teacher and broadcaster Bobby Siegel, as well as the broadcaster Claire Muldoon. Claire, let me come to you first as a parent. When you hear about a school toughening up the rules, getting the kids to quite literally pull up their socks, do you support that vision?
Absolutely, and I'd say brava and bravo. This is why are people now so frightened of the word discipline?
Right.
In fact, these teachers are now striking because they say that they use the word draconian values like not forgetting forgetting your pen, too many toilet trips, this, that, and the next thing. Don't they realise that by repeatedly forgetting your tools of your trade, then you wouldn't even be working in the workplace? These kids need to remember that if they do forget something, they will be punished, but they can't. Why can't they see the benefit of becoming prepared, being resilient, being intelligent enough to respect discipline, respect their teachers, respect their fellow pupils, and indeed respect the rules of the schools? And let's not forget, Bev, that if you are a parent who's applying to a school, it's almost like a contract. You want your child to go there, you accept the rules and regulations because probably that's part and parcel of the reason of your child and you wanting your child to be there. can't you see that it actually underpins and helps the staff to educate your child appropriately?
So that they behave. Bobby, part of the reason these teachers are striking for 5 days, they're taking a whole 5 days off when kids have already missed so much education, is because the teachers themselves have been told to dress in a professional manner, leave the jogging pants at home and the trainers, get a suit on and set an example. What do you make of the teachers walking away and saying, no, I'm not doing it?
So I think the reality is, I think the majority of teachers will probably dress professionally for the environment. But I think the issue in this school in particular is that teachers weren't consulted on these new draconian measures. And of course,
why do you say it's draconian? What's draconian about saying to kids mustn't forget their pens?
Exactly.
It's not draconian.
In this particular school, the same punishments are apparently handed out for forgetting a pen to deliberate vandalism. So again, as a teacher, you need discretion. There needs to be a sliding scale. Of course, if a child repeatedly forgets a pen, they should be sanctioned. But if someone breaks a desk or someone forgets a pen, they're not the same two punishments. So I think it's, again, in this particular school, parents have come out and said, actually, they feel as if this punishment-focused environment actually makes the students live in fear. And again, we want young people...
If they come equipped, they know the rules.
Yeah,
they know the rules, and in
creating
fact, some of the staff from this school have actually articulated this point, thus that it actually undermines them as teachers. It actually undermines their ability to discipline the children within their classes. This is an absolutely abhorrent point of view. What are the children in this school picking up from this? What are they learning from this? They are learning that if you don't like something, 5 days on strike. There we go. What is it? Christmas time? Do the staff need to go for Christmas shopping? Is that why they've got the time off? No. Wear become appropriately dressed, wear uniforms. But these sanctions, Bobby, actually give parity. They actually across the board, and it is equal for all.
Go on, Bobby.
Yeah, again, I think obviously strikes are always meant to be the sort of measure of last resort. And I think if I was the academy chain, the head teachers running this organization, they need to consult teachers. And again, in any school, whenever you change anything, whether you add new year groups or you add a new building, there's always a consultation process. And at the end of it, if there are teachers that think it's not the right environment for me, they move on. But in this case, it feels like, again, from reading as an external person, the school imposed these rules on everyone, the staff and the students, and said, this is a new system. So maybe it's a case of management of communication of the issue, because, again, I know that as a teacher, I don't want an ill-disciplined class, but also I want the discretion to manage things. Again, if a child makes a one-off forgetting of a pen, it will be very tough to give them, say, 1 hour detention. Whereas if a child is
Bobby, you're minimising it, because it's actually been said it was repeated missing of pens, and that's just one small element of it. We've got schools now. My children went to very, very good, strict schools in London, and they weren't. My son wasn't allowed to run around. They walked in the cloisters in silence. I mean, all of this adds to personal integrity. This discipline is key. That's what, I mean, I now define people post oat milk and before oat milk, because I can guarantee a lot of the Gen Zers out there didn't even know there was a time change, because everything is digital.
One of the things that, one of the measures, Bobby, that the teachers are looking for, this is what the head is looking for, the teachers are rebelling against. Silence in the corridors at all times. Pupils sitting in rows, even in the drama lessons, and having the same punishments for everything, as you say, from forgetting a pen to deliberate vandalism. Why is it, do you think, that the teachers feel they're allowed to rebel against their head? I mean, you say they should be consulted on this. Well, I don't necessarily agree. And I think that if the head of that school wants to show leadership, they shouldn't feel the need to go to the teachers and say, I'd quite like to make the kids behave themselves. Are you all right with that? You know, unfortunately, schools aren't particularly democratic in that response. And in fact, a very good leader will tell the staff what they need to do. How do they fix this now in this school? Because as Claire says, you're giving a terrible message to the children about the fact that if you don't want to do something, then just walk out.
But in the real world, if we're not happy with something, again, if you're a train worker or if you work for a different organisation, you leave, you walk with your feet. And again, I expect teachers in this organisation, if they're not happy with the way they, as staff, are being treated, they'll walk to the school next door or down the street. And I think, again, even simple things like the policies like silence in corridors, I think you do need orderly, mannered corridors. But silence, I think, doesn't reflect the real world, because young people, when they enter the world of work, when they go to work in office and parliament, whatever they do, they have an environment where there's respect and agreement, but you're not walking around in silence. You're not sitting.
Bobby, how many young
like
prepubescent teenagers,
I think
especially
it's about trying to find a balance. It's a balance, because in the real world, it's not just like either 1 or 0. Find a balance where there's discipline, but not like, again, the draconian type measure.
It's not draconian. Please stop using language like that. It just sends out the wrong message.
Do you think that reflects the real world? Do you think in Parliament or in a NHS?
I don't think our Parliament reflects the real world at all.
What we're going to do now, we're going to bring the panel in here, because we've got Emma Wolfe, who is spitting tax to my left, and Carol Owen spitting tax to my right. I don't think either of you are going to agree with Bobby.
You know what, really, I know Bobby really well, who always dresses beautifully, by the way, and yet he's kicking up. These teachers are saying they don't want to be told what they have to wear. They don't want to have to be told they look smart. I mean, how dare they? But the most important thing in all of this is that, you know, they're always going on about how important education is for the children. These teachers don't give a stuff about these kids' education, because they're prepared to walk away for 5 days, and she quietly says, Christmas shopping. It wouldn't surprise me. But, you know, if you care about children's education, if you care about continuity, if you care about preparing them to go into the outside world, discipline is a great thing. The reason lots of young people now, you know, they go into jobs and they're shocked by what they have to do, like do what they're told. It's because they were never taught to follow the rules at school.
Yeah.
So they go into the workplace and they think, well, I don't have to do what I'm told.
And also, we're creating a whole generation, Emma, aren't we, of kids that have no resilience because they never have to do anything they don't want to do.
And they become victims. I'm probably at the most of the sharpest of the sharp end at the moment. I've toured around 30 primary schools. I've got a 3-year-old and I'm choosing his school. And I've toured around 30 primary schools in London in the last few weeks. So it's really interesting to realise what matters to you. And I do want uniform, and I do want discipline, and I do want him to have rules, and I do want him to stand up when teachers enter the room, and I do want him to have academic values and high standards. What is wrong with that? As Carol says, this is about the teachers. This isn't about the students. Like all of these strikes, what really depresses me, the teachers are striking because they don't want to be told what to wear. They don't want to be told to wear a suit. This is absolutely pathetic. What is wrong with saying, there are lots of schools out there. I don't want a school for my son where it's free-flow play and where you can do what you want. I do want uniform. I do want standards. And, you know, everybody has a choice.
And maybe where they call the teacher by Miss or Mr. or rather by the first name.
Where they use books and they have classrooms and desks. They don't just have screens and digital tablets.
Uniforms both for the teacher, and I don't mean a proper uniform, I mean smart, and uniforms for the kids. They're a great leveller. Uniforms for children, what they do is...
Children love uniforms as well.
Not just that, but they're classless. So you can come from a family that's got very little money, or you come from a family with a lot, and no one knows, and it's not there as a barrier between children. So I think uniforms are vitally important. But this is about stroppy teachers, exactly, that don't want to be told what to do. They don't want to be told, as Bev said before, to get the joggers off and put something smart on.
Let's bring Bobby and Claire back in, just to wrap up then.
Bobby, the stroppy teacher.
Bobby, just coming to you then, as our teacher, they should just all get their marching orders this lot, shouldn't they?
I think so.
No. I think, again, if I was a head teacher, what I would do is I would make sure I consult the staff, and then if you consult them and some of them disagree, that's their call. But if it was like
leadership,
I'm going to change the way the school runs. So I think any leader, good leaders, need to make sure they bring on board their staff, their people. Again, if you're a politician, a leader of a party, if you go against the grain of your party, you're not going to get their support, and you won't be in a position of power. So I think it's about getting their support.
On the children.
You need to get their support. Claire, like in a school, you can't have one teacher against the rest of the staff body.
Bobby, look, as a head teacher, the clue's in the name. It's head, leadership. These are values. These are the reason why the headship is there, to construct a disciplined force of teaching staff that are accountable to the child, to the parent, and to the rest of their staff members. And this is at the crux of it. These are values that have to be given, not a wishy-washy, do you consult on this, do you agree with that? I'm sorry. In life, it should be, from the headship, my way or the highway. And if you don't like it... There's plenty of other schools, I'm sure, that will take you.
Well, OK, Bobby Seagull, Claire Muldoon, thank you so much. It's such an interesting discussion, and it just has so many tentacles from that issue that affect the whole of society. If you get it right when the kids at school, they're going to be much better adults.
And children prefer it. Children need boundaries. They need to feel secure. I went to a school like that, and it was strict, and we were silent in the corridors. But it's actually quite comforting, especially from children that come from maybe chaotic backgrounds, that don't have much structure. It's very nice to, as Carol says, wear a uniform, to go in on time, to pull your socks up, to take your equipment, to carry your book bag. Children
do you know what?
love that.
The problem is, and some of the parents have said, Carol, that the problem is that they shouldn't be punished. There should be positive motivation, positive reinforcement.
They absolutely should be punished.
Loved and
The world is about, you've got to train kids the difference between right and wrong, and punishment is a way of doing it. I'm not saying beat kids, but there has to be a consequence to bad behaviour, and that's what I feel is not in schools anymore.
We've run out of time, but that was a great debate.
And to the end of our week, thank you so much, Emma, Carol, Bobby, Claire, and most importantly, thank you to you, our GB News viewers and listeners. We will be back.
We'll be back not tomorrow at 9:30, as it says on the autocue. We'll be back with you on Monday at 9:30.
That's right. Have a great weekend. From us, Britain's Newsroom with, I think it's probably Tom and Ellie. We'll be back tomorrow morning. See you then.
Hello again, it's Alex Burkill here with your latest GB News weather forecast. Storm Ciarán has battered the UK over the last few hours or so, and whilst we've seen the worst of it, there is still some further wet and windy weather to come as the low pressure clears its way towards the east. The strongest winds still across southern parts, likely to be in the southeast as we go through the second half of the day. Still the risk of gusts in excess of 70 to 80 miles per hour, but we have likely seen the most impactful weather already today. Heavy rain for many places too. That could cause some further flooding in some areas, though some drier spells towards the far northwest of the UK. It is going to be a cold feeling day, especially in the rain and those strong winds, and temperatures a little bit below average for the time of year. More wet and blustery weather to come as we go through this evening and overnight, particularly down the eastern side of the UK. Eastern Scotland, northeast England likely to see some further heavy rain and possibly more flooding as we go through the early hours of Friday too. Elsewhere, some drier, clearer weather towards the south and west, and so it may be a touch chillier than last night because there will be some clear skies around. Into Friday, and we still have a low pressure out in the North Sea. That is what was Ciarán, and it's bringing further blustery, heavy, showery weather across particularly eastern parts of Scotland, maybe northeast England too, but also showers coming down across Northern Ireland into Wales and western England as well, staying driest towards the southeast, and here temperatures a little bit higher than today with highs of around 14 Celsius.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics